Good morning. Welcome to you and welcome to this virtual session for the Council for Exceptional Children Conference this February. So my name is Jessica Hunt. A little bit about me, I'm in the College of Education at North Carolina State University. I have a dual background in special education and math education. And I was always also a math teacher, pardon me, in Orange County, Florida. I know the live part of the conference was in Orlando this year. So I'm here on behalf of myself and my team, which includes the members that you see listed on the screen, to talk to you today about how to enhance engagement and fraction concepts with a game-based curriculum. So we're really excited to talk with you about this today. And we're going to frame this talk within the context of a game-based curriculum that we've been developing as a part of an NSF project called Dream2B. And you see the emblem for that on the screen. This is a National Science Foundation funded project. So we also want to give a shout out and a thank you for that support. Within our talk today, we hope that you learn about how to engage and enhance, rather, student engagement and fraction concepts with curriculums like Dream2B and how their use can really support and extend fraction learning for elementary and middle school students, especially students who may have difficulties learning fractions. So I thought we could start our conversation today by looking at an overview of the Dream2B curriculum. So where it came from, how it's set up, and what mathematics standards the game addresses, because that's important for us to know. Then we can really get into talking about how the game works and take a look at each part of both the game and then the curriculum in which the game sits. Again, we're talking about game-based curriculums, which means that the game is an integral part of what happens in the curriculum, but it's not the only part. So we wanted to take some time to give you sort of the whole experience of how these sort of game enhanced or technology enhanced curriculums can really help support kids. After that, we will finish up and show sort of a summary video of everything that we talked about today. So we're really excited to get started. Let's hop in. We'll start with our overview. So you may be wondering, where did the idea for this curriculum come from? The idea for Dream2B came from another project that I'd worked on in the earlier part of my career called Fraction Activities and Assessments for Conceptual Teaching. And what that curriculum was a longitudinal look at how students with learning disabilities in particular built up concepts of fractions. So how was it over time that these students came to understand fraction concepts and procedures and how they relate to each other? So what you see on the screen is a result of that curriculum. And the result is a learning trajectory of fractions. And generally, what learning trajectory means is just a series of conceptual stages, if you will, that students come to understand as they develop really rich understandings of fractions as quantities, as coordinated units, some people may say. So again, that was a longitudinal program. And aside from developing the learning trajectory itself, or the sort of mapping of those concepts, the curriculum also, or the project rather, also developed a curriculum that was based on the trajectory activities. We did some testing of that curriculum, some light testing, and are still testing it. And we found good preliminary evidence that suggests that when kids engage in the trajectory activities, that they increase their fraction concepts and also their overall fraction knowledge. So things like, for those of you who give end of year course exams or other sort of tests, that measures of this curriculum directly increased, but so did scores on those tests, if that matters. So some nice preliminary evidence there. If you're looking, by the way, for a free fraction curriculum without the game, like if you're interested in what I just talked about, there's a link on the screen that'll link you right out to that. So that project is the basis for what I'm going to talk to you about today in Dream2B. So you may be wondering then, why did you take this into a game enhanced curriculum? The reason is that I wanted to take the idea of trajectories further and build a tool, a technology-based tool that took that same trajectory and used it to provide opportunities for students to both create and quantify fractions through tasks, kind of like the non-technology tool currently does. But I also was really looking for a way to increase student engagement, to get students even more excited about really jumping in and engaging their thinking when it comes to these fractional situations. I also found, as a part of my previous work, that real-time strategy-specific feedback is really key to helping kids really notice and reflect on their problem-solving actions. So I was looking for a tool to help me as the teacher really do that in an effective and personalized way. And I was also looking for a tool that was easy to implement in classrooms, that could enhance and enrich the good things that teachers are already doing. So that is to say that the Dream2B in its curriculum is a supplement. It's what's called a supplemental curriculum tool. It's not meant to replace curriculums that people are already using, but it is meant to enhance what teachers are already using in schools. So if we put all of that together, that turned into Dream2B. And if you look on the screen, you'll see a graphic that shows how each lesson in Dream2B is set up. The entire supplemental Dream2B curriculum has 36 lessons, and those 36 lessons are set across 6 different game worlds that we'll talk about shortly. Each lesson lasts 35 minutes and has 3 different parts that we'll get to a little bit more as we continue to talk today. But I just wanted to kind of give you this preview so that you can kind of see how the curriculum works and how the game fits into the overall curriculum. So the 36 lessons in Dream2B, of course, align to curriculum standards. So what you'll see on the screen now is a shorthand of the main curriculum standards that Dream2B addresses. The blue boxes show the fraction standards, of course, that the game is meant to address primarily. And again, for those of us that that know our state standards, we know that these are a shorthand to the many fraction standards that we see across the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So a good way to think about it, if you're kind of looking for something beyond this shorthand, is generally Dream2B is going to address all of your third, fourth, and fifth grade strand in terms of fraction standards. Dream2B is also going to address the standards that you see notated by the orange boxes. And the reason for this is that, as we know, learning of fractions is intricately connected to learning of things like whole number, measurements, multiplicative reasoning, etc. So because we are looking so intently at fractions in Dream2B, the curriculum also pulls in and draws from these ideas from whole number, multiplicative reasoning, and measurement. If you're ever curious, we do have a full alignment document available. Right now, that document is based in Florida and North Carolina because that's where the game is currently being tested. And I would be happy to share that with you. You can always send me an email and I can send that out to you. Okay, so we've got that big broad overview down. So now let's zoom in a bit and look at how this game works. To start, let's watch a quick preview video of the game and its components. This preview video, if you're wondering, first showed up at an online gaming expo put on by IES this past summer in 2021. So let's take a look quickly. Okay, so there's a very quick introduction to Dream2B and how it works. So let's dive in and talk about each piece of the game and why it was built in and designed the way that it was. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see three features, design features, if you will, that we utilized to create Dream2B. And all of this was in service of, again, promoting enhanced or increased engagement, along with opportunities for students to access and advance and solidify their fraction concepts. So the access piece comes from universal design, which we'll talk about more about what that is in a moment, but you may have, I'm sure that you've heard of the concept of universal design from learning, from CAST and other great resources. So we'll get into how universal design was used to support access and advancement of concepts in Dream2B in just a moment. We also incorporated tasks and something called sandbox play, which also works again to provide lots of means of engagement and expression of knowledge, which again are kind of ties into UDL features. And we also built in something called cognitive feedback, or sometimes we call this action adaptive feedback. And we'll talk a moment later about why that's so important in terms of really keeping engagement high and doing that from a stance of access. So let's start with the universal design components of this game. If you've heard of universal design, but you're not quite sure what it really does, to summarize it quickly, universal design works to deconstruct barriers that students experience in curriculum materials. So it's this whole idea of students often in their thinking are more dissimilar than they are similar. So really, if you think about it, the only solution is to design materials that anticipate and allow for all these differences instead of only allowing for one way. So universal design for learning addresses that idea by demanding that curriculum and game developers include multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression of knowledge, both in the gaming interface, as well as the tasks, the tools, the sandbox play that we'll talk about in a moment. All of these ideas kind of come together under this UDL requirement to take down barriers for kids as they learn. So, of course, we use the Universal Design for Learning framework to design Dream2B. And the graphic that you see on the screen is showing you just a few of the Universal Design for Learning components that Dream2B is built in. The bubbles kind of around the snapshot of gameplay kind of call out some of those features. For instance, rich graphics and multiple ways for students to view the same problem. In-game experts that provide feedback, strategy-specific feedback that we'll talk about more in a moment is another design feature. Anything that you see in words on the screen is either auto-narrated or can be narrated if the player would like as students play. So again, that whole sort of text-to-speech, speech-to-text idea in the user interface. Cognitive prompts that assist students with noticing their actions in the game and giving real-time strategy-specific feedback to allow for a personalized means of expression and engagement. Complex multi-step directions being presented using a series of tasks to help students who may have processing difficulties. Choices of analytic tools that students can use. So offering an array of options in which students can use to think about the task instead of requiring them to only do one thing. Also, customization is something that we do in the game quite a bit in terms of both the character that the students take on, which is Bunny, which we'll talk about in a moment. Bunny can look however the player would like Bunny to look, and it also becomes a point of engagement as the game goes on, and the player is given more options to customize Bunny according to their preferences. Then there's the tasks and the sandbox play itself. So the tasks are aligned to the trajectory from the earlier fact project that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. And each game world, remember I told you there were 6, each game world represents a different STEM or ICT career. That was on purpose. We are an NSF funded iTest project, so we're always looking for ways to link what we do with curriculums and technology tools out to the larger community and society. So we purposefully picked these different careers, and you can see that the coaches in each world that you see displayed on the screen exemplify each of those 6 careers. So in World 1, we've got a wind turbine technician. World 2, we've got a solar panel installer. In World 3, a fire inspector. In World 4, a photogrammetrist. And in World 5, a computer programmer. And if you're wondering, Jessica, you said 6 worlds. The 6th world is a conglomeration of all the careers, kind of like a career day, if you will. As I mentioned, we purposefully chose each of these careers because they're the fastest growing careers over the next 10 years, according to the Bureau of Labor. The game, in terms of, again, promoting engagement, is narrative driven. So the narrative and the main character motivates the player to engage with the tasks and to help solve the challenge tasks in the game. So let's watch a little bit about how that occurs.
Bunny was told that it was their decision, but were encouraged that it could be wrong. Soaring entered a new world.
So that's a little bit about the narrative that promotes the main character, which is Bunny, to engage in the tasks and ultimately help a series of challenges set across these 6 worlds. There we go. And these challenge tasks, as you can see, promote students to both build up and quantify unit fractions, build up and quantify non-unit fractions, do something called reverse or build up reversible reasoning, as well as something that's called recursive reasoning, which is a fancy word for multiplicative notions of fractions, which connects to operations on fractions like multiplication and division. If you're wondering kind of, well, how's that sound in terms of, curriculum standards that I may be a little bit more familiar with, it connects to standards like comparing unit fractions and non-unit fractions. So we're reaching down into like third and fourth grade there, adding and subtracting, same denominator fractions, multiplying fractions by whole numbers in fourth grade, meaning of numerator and denominator and equivalence, third, fourth, and fifth grade, and then getting into multiplication of fractions by fractions and division of fractions in fifth grade, along with other operations. So the tasks, again, are supported by something called sandbox play. And again, taking this back to engagement, this becomes really important. I'm going to show you just a little demo video as I talk that doesn't have any sound in it, but it's kind of showing you what some of these possible player actions are in the context of this task, which is, if you're wondering, the player is being challenged to share 3 solar panels equally among 4 houses. And as you can see here, the player is not really told whether they should start by partitioning or distributing. They're given a choice. And as to which of those actions they wish to engage with and how. So for example, this player has decided to partition each solar panel into 2 parts until they come across the last solar panel and realize that they have to change their plan, which becomes an interesting strategy to think about and how it relates to the equal share that each house ends up receiving. Partitioning, iterating, and distributing are the core actions that students use in Dream2B to build up and master fraction concepts and relate those concepts to some of the procedures and standards that we talked about earlier. Sandbox play helps increase engagement because it provides the player a low stakes way to try out their ideas and receive feedback on those ideas, which is important. The last piece of the game is called cognitive feedback. Feedback to students in this game, as I've mentioned earlier, is tied to the different strategies or the different actions that students use to solve each of the tasks. And generally, we've broken this feedback down into 3 main categories. The first is helping students set a goal or use a previous goal to see if it works in a new problem. The second category is notice and monitor. So here, this feedback category is trying to help the player notice their own actions in the game and the results of their actions. So the piece of feedback is meant to explicate that for the player, to point it out, to point out what they did, to get them to look at it and to see if that strategy is working for them toward their goal. The final category for cognitive feedback is called reflect and revise. So this piece of feedback would help a student reflect on the result of their strategy, which could have been helpful to them in solving the problem or not helpful. So there's that piece of reflection. It could also help them reflect on a strategy that they've been using across several problems. So the picture on the screen is showing you an example of the notice and monitor feedback, particular again to a strategy. And I keep mentioning that because it's important to point out that we spent a lot of time in the earlier project that I mentioned, documenting an array of strategies that students take in these tasks. So our feedback is action adaptive. That means that it changes based on the strategy students are using. And the reason that's important, if you think about it, is that it's helping to provide an individualized form of support as students play, which we found to be fundamentally important in the earlier program. As you know, we've included game coaches based in each of the 5 STEM or ICT careers to help provide this immediate feedback to students as they play. So it's the coach character that pops up as students are playing in the lower right-hand screen and gives them this individualized feedback. So now that you understand about how the game was designed, let's talk about how the curriculum works. So again, the game is embedded in the curriculum. It's one of 3 fundamental parts of the curriculum, again, which contains these 36 lessons. So let's spend some time looking now at the curriculum itself and each of its parts. Every lesson starts with a preview. These previews are either going to introduce the game narrative, or it's going to connect in some way to the STEM career explored in a world. And I said preview because these are brief. They're only 5 minutes long. They're meant to be that way. They're really just a way to get students curious and get them going into gameplay, and also to help support that they understand what they're trying to do in the gameplay for that day. These previews are mainly video and question driven. So let's take a look at one. These are the teacher materials, or an example of what a teacher material might look like for a preview. So as you can see here, this guide is asking the teacher to display an intro video, which all of our materials are supported by Google Slides, which can be shown much like I'm showing you in this Zoom presentation, or these can be printed off and made as transparencies. There's a lot of different ways that you might use these materials we're hoping can be helpful to people. So this preview is asking the teacher to show the video. It's giving the teacher some words to use as before and after the video is shown. And it's also giving the teacher a direction to ask 1 or 2 students to restate or to make public what they heard in the video, and that's done to support a shared understanding among students of what they're trying to do in the gameplay that day, so that students understand. If you're wondering, there are, as we've mentioned before, many tutorials that are embedded at the start of each gameplay world, and some of these lesson previews will explicate or show those tutorials purposively. So let's take a look at one of those tutorials and how they look and what they do, so that you can get an idea. It says, "Hi, I'm Gloria. This is the solar specialist tutorial." And this video has the voice turned off, but this would be read to the student. "Solar panels capture the sun's light energy. We can turn it into electricity for our homes. This is the equal cut tool. Use it to cut the solar panels into same-sized pieces. Click the arrows to cut the solar panels to equal sizes. These transporters will deliver the solar panels to the house. All transporters need the same amount of solar panels. The transporters will show you if you have the correct amount. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, but you can see kind of the point of these tutorials is the coach comes in, unpacks the core gameplay mechanics that happen at that level or that world so that students understand what the tools do and generally what the challenge is based in for that world. The next part is the gameplay itself. So this is the fun part. This is where students engage in the problem challenges or the fraction tasks and receive the cognitive feedback as they play. It's 10 minutes long. So of the 35 minutes, students are playing for 10 minutes. And the tasks in these games, worlds and levels, if you will, are purposively sequenced. And we know that this is a core tenet of an effective curriculum is to have purposively sequenced tasks, representations, and number values. So Dream2B has all of that. Where that sequence is coming from is the learning trajectory that was mapped in the previous project. That's what allowed us to understand what was the best sequence, if you will, to really promote access and engagement in fraction concepts. Each world is mastery driven. That means that there's a mastery requirement as students are solving these tasks that they must demonstrate before another world unlocks. So here's a challenge task. Again, we saw something like this earlier where we have 3 solar panels in world 2 being divided equally among 4 houses. So I want you to watch this video clip again and look at the sample strategy that's being shown here. This isn't the only way students can solve this problem, but it is one way. And I just want you to look at what you notice. So you may have noticed a lot of things. One thing I noticed was that it seemed that this player first wanted to use the grab tool, which is that little white glove looking tool. Maybe because they thought they might just distribute a whole panel to each house, and maybe they realized they didn't have enough. It sure seems that way. At that point, something very concrete that we can all agree on, I think, is that the players started by distributing halves of panels, 1/2 panel to each house. And then when they came upon the final panel, they realized that they had to do something else. They had to split it into another number of parts that would give them an equal share for each house. So if you think about what that could mean for the teacher, the first thing we like to point out in this curriculum is that as students are playing the game, the teacher is active as well. And our teacher guides explicate that. So as you're listening to and observing students' strategies and discussion with each other as they play, take note of the things that you're noticing, these important strategies, these words, these phrases. And our curriculum materials are designed to help you do that. So looking at things like how were students using the number of houses or rovers or transporters, if you will, to plan the partitioning of the solar panels. Were they using it before they started acting in the problem, or did they notice something as they were playing? In this case, the player was using halving, probably because cutting things in half is a pretty accessible strategy to students. And then they realized in their gameplay they had to do something else. You know, what is that? What could that mean? And why might that be important mathematically? Okay. Another question that we included in our materials is, did students coordinate the created fractional units with the size of one whole? So we didn't get to that part in our little example video, but later the student would actually be asked to quantify how much each house gets, and they would be given some choices to choose from there and to look at. And finally, a good part of teachers' role as students play the game is to observe and to listen, but it's also to question. So again, our materials were designed to help teachers to do that. So because we spent so much time mapping out all these possible strategies in our last project, we used that again here to give the teacher some actions that they might use in the form of questions, much like the real-time cognitive tutor, but these questions are a little bit more broad, but it gives the teachers a way to interact with students as they play the game and really help keep engagement and learning going as students play. They also really are nice to help teachers informally assess how the students are reasoning. The after game task and discussion is a pivotal part of Dream2B. Each task either directly connects to student gameplay, so that's the concepts and action part, or connects to a skill or procedure that the gameplay supports. These after game tasks take 20 minutes, and they're really designed to be discourse driven. So they're designed to be a way for students, after they've stepped out of the game, to think, talk, and share as a group about their evolving thinking, and to consider strategies, consider concepts, and start to over the lessons in the world, step away from the context of the world and toward the big mathematical ideas that each world is designed to address. So this is an example of one of the after gameplay tasks. This is called a worked example. If you've never used a worked example before, they are proven in research to support and extend student learning, especially when combined with problem solving, like students are doing in the game. Worked examples can show a correct, a partially correct, or an incorrect strategy. So as you can see in our game, the worked examples are directly tied to gameplay experiences that students are having across these different worlds. Again, as I've used in other parts of this talk today, this is game world 2, the solar panel installer. And in this worked example, Gloria, the coach, is working to share 5 panels among 4 houses. So the after game task would start by showing this worked example, which shows her strategy. What do you notice? And this part of the worked example would then show the result of her strategy. Students watch this dynamically, by the way. So they watch a video of the strategy being used so they can see the coach's action in the game and its result. So the action was cutting each panel into 4 parts. The result was these 5 parts. The player, much like in the game, Gloria rather, much like the player in the game, is then asked to place the parts of the panel onto the roofing structure and has to say how many or how much panels each house receives. In this case, Gloria shows and selects 1 1/4 panels for each house. So after students watch this, this is where the work begins. The teacher then asks the students to explain to themselves why this strategy is correct. In other words, why this strategy results in an equal share of solar panels for each house. And they do that using the questions shown on the screen. The student has a chance to think on their own, to write their responses to at least 2 of these questions, and then pair up with another student and talk about and rehearse their thoughts. And finally, share out with a group. There are also questions for both teachers and students to help them know how to share. So things like sentence frames, and for teachers, something from math education called talk moves that can really help teachers direct and support students to talk to each other about their reasoning. So here's the lesson materials that supports the teacher's actions during this after game task. As I shared earlier, we also linked Google Slides and reproducibles that teachers can use to support their students' work as well as their own during this time. So we're coming to the end of our time together, and I really hope that you've enjoyed hearing about how games like Dream2B can help support engagement and fraction concepts for elementary and middle school students. So I wanted to finish up today by listening to a summary video. This one's a little bit longer, but it does a good job of restating a lot of the points that I tried to make in the presentation today, so that you have some takeaways.
There are many elementary mathematics curriculum on national scale. Disabilities are an underutilized source of diverse science, technology, mathematics careers, as well as information technology. Curriculum has more than 2.4 million unfilled jobs. STEM and ICT career opportunities, disability, society advances. However, these careers are only attainable through active conceptual understanding of fraction in elementary school. Let's take a look at how this works. Diverse array of choices. Provide the function. They do a work of problem-solving activity. 5, 7, I think career problems. The players will solar panels. They engage in distributed solar panel systems and solar energy. Players must be partitioning and iterating to determine the site and its energy. Players step into life in environments that is minor iterations that were not impacted by preferred violations. Different players together and either create a new logic primary verb of is the of a photo the non-unit fraction projection of a rectangle minus the principal length. The person right components separate the block separate from the block integrated fundamentals but that the minimum threshold
So again, on behalf of my team, I would really like to thank everyone for your attendance and attention today. We hope that we have explicated some ways and that using game-based curriculums can help enhance engagement and conceptual understanding of fractions for elementary and middle school students. If you're ready to play, we do have an updated site for the game that's coded right now, but if you put in the 9876, you can play the game and see what you think. We are also happy to answer any questions that you have about this presentation or the Dream2B curriculum holistically. You can always reach me at jhunt5@ncsu.edu. We again wanted to thank you for your participation and your attendance.